Now, I used to know a friend of mine who worked in the office. Her name was Mabel, and she used to be an EA at my school. She had left to do an office job, but she did tell me this one story that really frightened her. Most of the time when she did office work, she usually never had any creepy or eerie encounters. But after this story, though, she may have second thoughts. It was around sometime at nighttime at the office she was working at. Of course, she took the night shift since she was pretty much didn't have anything on her schedule, and she wanted to make extra money to support her husband and her kids. She liked working in the office during the nighttime, as most of the time it'd be quiet, and she wouldn't have to deal with anyone hassling or anything like that. Since she was the only one working in the office, she was just doing her work in her cubicle when she heard some footsteps coming from around the cubicle that she was in. At first, she thought it could have been another worker, but she pointed her flashlight and looked around, but she couldn't find anyone. She started to get a little suspicious, thinking that there was somebody actually in there. She went ahead and looked around the whole office building thing on the floor she was at, but she couldn't find any traces of anyone. She went back to her cubicle and was about to continue to her work when she all of a sudden heard running. She was confused and wondered who was just in the building causing this ruckus. She went out in the hallway and started looking up and down the hallway. Of course, it was dark, with only a few lights illuminating the area, but she couldn't find the source of the person or the noise. She ended up going back to work. Fast forward to around maybe 4 a.m. when she was just done on her office night shift. She was getting ready to go home when she all of a sudden heard a scream. Its scream sounded like a woman, so she ended up looking in the hallway and calling out if anyone was there and needed help. But there was no reply, so this was even more confusing to her. She called out for anyone who might be in the hallway to reveal themselves if they are around. As she did this, however, she ended up looking to see that there was this woman shaking in fear. She was sitting on the corner of the hallway and she was rocking back and forth as if she was in a mental state. She ends up walking over towards the woman, and the woman freaked out a little bit at first. "Are you okay?" Mabel asked, but this woman couldn't speak or say anything. She ended up laughing hysterically and did looking like she was convulsing. Now, Mabel decided that she would call 911, and as she did call 911, this woman started screaming and then tried to attack Mabel. Mabel went to the front of the office and prayed to God and hoped that the police would get there. By the time the police arrived, they had looked inside the office and searched the entire office building, but they couldn't find that woman. Either that woman must have escaped somehow, or something else must have happened. There was no update regarding her, and Mabel is convinced that this woman has probably gone to get help that she needs. But yet again, who really knows where this woman is now? She was not heard from again, but Mabel still wonders to this day, what was this woman going to do if she were to try to attack Mabel and the police arrived any later? She didn't work in that office building thing very long after that. After about 2 months, she quit doing night shifts, and she never worked in an office building like this again. So far, she is living a really happy life, and she is really enjoying herself with her husband and kids. This is one story that would always stick with Mabel, and she even wonders to this day if this woman was mentally insane or high on drugs. There was no evidence about this woman, and there wasn't any update regarding her. Before she quit, though, Mabel never had any experience like that again, and she certainly had never seen that woman again. She wondered if the woman might have went to another city or something, but who really knows if that's the case. This story still gets to her to this day, and she even wonders today, what was this woman thinking of, and what would she have done to her if she didn't get help? That still frightens her to this very day. A friend of mine named Dustin had a brother who was working as a security guard in an office area. Most of the time, nothing strange or abnormal had happened. But after this story, though, it definitely raised some flags. Now, Dustin's brother Logan was pretty much doing his usual routine as a security guard. He did the night shifts mainly because they were mainly calm and quiet, and he never really had anything suspicious or anything in particular happening. The only people he came across with was people doing the night shift and pretty much escorting people out of the office building as they were closed for the night. As Logan was doing his usual rounds of the office and was doing his security guard duties, he ended up deciding to stop and play on his phone for a bit since he was on his break. As he was on his break, he ended up feeling that the room was unsurprisingly cold. That was really weird, and he didn't even know why the room was cold, it just felt cold. He ended up looking over and wondered if anyone messed with the AC, but the AC wasn't even on, and the temperature of the room was about the same. That was very strange, and Logan decided to go ahead and do another round to make sure nobody was messing with any machinery or anything. As he walked around and did his round around, he ended up looking over to see that there was someone's jacket. He ends up picking it up and examined the jacket, but found no initials. He didn't even recognize who wore the jacket, and he couldn't even find out who the person was that was wearing the jacket. He asked one of the people of the office employees about it, and they said they had no idea who the jacket belonged to. They assumed that maybe another worker might have left it, so Logan decided to take it to the Lost and Found. When he got back from the Lost and Found, he ends up feeling like he was being watched. He didn't even know what, but something really felt really odd. It felt like he was being watched. He looked around, but he couldn't find anybody that was around, and he decided to do another round just to make sure that there was nobody around. As he was doing another round, he ends up looking over and seeing that there was a person. It looked like a man, maybe in his mid-40s, and he was staring at Logan in particular. He ended up waving at him and smiling like he was really weirded out. Now Logan was weirded out by this, so he decided to call the other security guard and warn him about the danger. Just as he did that, this guy started bolting towards him, and that's where Logan got knocked to the ground. Logan, however, was managed to try to catch up to the guy, and by the time he caught up, he tackled the man to the ground. The man tried to struggle to get free, but the security guard arrived, and they eventually knocked him out with a vase that they managed to throw at his head. As he was knocked out, they called the police, and the police ended up taking him. As it turns out, he has been wanted for breaking and entering houses. He had been doing this for months, and they were glad that they caught him because he was attempting to try and hurt one of the employees working the night shift. Nothing like that has ever happened, but aside from a few instances where some teenagers were just fucking around, but nothing like that has ever happened. It still frightens him to this day knowing that there was somebody there, but whoever could have been around, that was definitely something about who that man was. Maybe that jacket belonged to that man, but of course, no one claimed the jacket, so that's what Logan did. He kept the jacket for himself, and of course, there was no update about if that man ever got out or not. And He hopes it stays that way. Now, Jason used to work at the office buildings, and there was this one abandoned hospital building that he lived nearby, and it was definitely giving the creeps. The city Jason lived in was actually a half decent city. Of course, he lived near an abandoned hospital, but there was also a couple hospitals in the area. There was an abandoned office building that Jason happens to sometimes pass by on his way to school. He decided to get his friend Ashley to go with him to the abandoned office building. But of course, Ashley tried to convince him not to go there, as they were just worried that they might get in trouble. Jason tells her that they'd be fine and that there would be no security guards, as it's an abandoned office. They go to the abandoned office on the address, and it was surprisingly near the school they went to. Jason, along with Ashley, ended up walking inside the office, and they couldn't find anything, but they definitely see that this place was definitely abandoned. There was a lot of debris and graffiti around, so they decided to explore the office. They ended up going up and exploring around, and they couldn't really find too much of anything. The office building had been abandoned for a few years, so Jason, along with Ashley, were kind of a little freaked out by some of the graffiti. Some of them related to blood and Satan, some of them related to death. They were probably just thinking there was some edgy teens that were into that kind of stuff. That was why they saw graffiti, so they decided to brush it off as that. However, they ended up going to an office building that happened to be in there. The office building was actually pretty decent, but of course it looked run down. However, something was really messed up. What Jason and his friend Ashley found was shocking. They ended up seeing that there was a computer, and the computer had power and operating. That was kind of strange because the whole building didn't have any power. So they walked over towards the computer and ended up looking. It felt warm, like someone recently used it. As they looked for the computer, they realized that whoever this was definitely weird, as there was some fetish art sites, and it obviously kind of freaked them out. Why would the certain building have power on the computer? It just doesn't really make sense to Ashley or Jason. They ended up opening up a file, and it contained illegal content. They immediately decided to go to the police, so they decided to go to the cops. By the time the cops arrived, the computer with all the files were gone, and there were no trace of who would have left the files there. Of course, Jason did get grounded for a month for sneaking into an abandoned building after the police had a talking to with his parents. The same could be said for Ashley's parents, but they know now not to venture into abandoned buildings, as they never know who or what they may find. It still frightens them to this day, knowing that there was some files, some sicko was around and probably did some God knows what stuff. Whoever that person was that had those files, Jason and Ashley hope they don't meet again.